Ghislaine Maxwell, the former girlfriend of the deceased sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, has declined to answer questions from US lawmakers. Maxwell, seen here in file footage, is serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking. Speaking to members of Congress via video link, she repeatedly invoked constitutional protections known as the Fifth Amendment, allowing her to not answer lawmakers' questions. However, a lawyer representing Maxwell said she would be willing to testify and clear both Bill Clinton and Donald Trump's names if she were released from prison. Now, while congressional officials weigh Maxwell's offer, the lawyer for one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims says lawmakers should be careful with any information they receive from the convicted sex trafficker.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell certainly has critical information that would help us understand exactly, what happened and who was there at varying times. Some of that we've been able to piece together through the information from other witnesses, et cetera, but she was definitely at the center of this. The problem is she will never tell the truth. So we saw that during the deposition that we took in my case several years ago, where she lied repeatedly time after time again. We saw that in her most recent interview with Todd Blanche with the government. She lied repeatedly, provably false things she was stating during that interview. So the problem with the attention to her and giving her a voice is that there is no truth in what she says, and that's really what's missing here.
Right, Matthew Sheffield is a podcast host and a journalist. He's joining me now from Los Angeles. Great to have you with us. Ghislaine Maxwell has reportedly offered to cut a deal with congressional leaders. Do you know much more? Do we know much more about what she's offering and what exactly her demands are?
Well, we don't know the full extent of what she's demanding right now, but among the things that have been reported out and stated by members of Congress, she is saying that she wants a pardon from Donald Trump in order to testify publicly without invoking her Fifth Amendment right to not incriminate herself. And that's probably not going to be what a lot of people want to hear because, she very obviously, she's already been convicted of crimes, and there's a lot of evidence in the files that have been released thus far that there were indeed other crimes that were not prosecuted.
Do we know much, Matthew, about what kind of information she's prepared to share to get this deal moving? Well,
so there is a lot of outstanding information that we don't know about. So one of them, as the Congressman Jamie Raskin said earlier today, that there have been a lot of inappropriate redactions that are in apparent violation of the law that was passed to force the disclosure of the documents, including the forced censorship of records that are referring to people who were not victims of Epstein or Maxwell. And one of those, which he had mentioned, was that there were messages that were being sent back and forth between Trump and his lawyers. And wow. So the involvement of Trump with regard to Epstein, it seems to be much more extensive than was known. And we're seeing that also with regard to many other people in various governments in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. as well. So we're seeing that with his Commerce Secretary, who had lied and said he had no dealings with Epstein, but in fact was in business literally with Jeffrey Epstein after he had been convicted of his first crime.
The potential wildcard here seems to be some members of Congress are being allowed to view the unredacted Epstein files, and some have even threatened to expose people mentioned in those files. What more do we know about that? Well,
so in the U.S., there is a statutory authority that members of Congress have, that they are allowed to make statements on the floor of Congress, and they cannot be prosecuted for making those statements. And so that is what we've had two members of Congress here in the U.S., Ro Khanna, and then also his Republican counterpart. They are basically saying that we need these records. David Massey We need this information to be brought out to the public in compliance with the law. And if we don't get that released to the public, then we're going to release it to ourselves on the floor of Congress. And in that type of circumstance, they cannot be sued for libel or slander. And so Massey has been saying that he's going to read the names of the people that he sees when he goes and visits the records.
Matthew, great to have you on. Podcast host and journalist, really great to get your input. Thank you.
Thank you.